New statue in Times Square we're told, turning heads. It's making people not only stop and stare, but also reflect. A rare feat in the middle of one of the busiest places in the world. Zinnia Maldonado shows us why.
At 12 feet tall, in the middle of Times Square, stands a bronze sculpture of a young woman.
It's instantly stood out. It's powerful.
It's so tall and big.
The sculpture, created by artist Thomas Price, was unveiled at Duffy Square last week, and in just a matter of days, it has stopped hundreds in their tracks. Who is she? Well, technically, she's whoever you want her to be.
Me being a plus-size Black woman, I kind of looking at it was just like, oh, I wonder what me as a small child would have thought looking at something like that. Representation.
The piece is part of a series called Grounded in the Stars, which Gene Cooney, director of Times Square Art, says confronts preconceived notions of identity and representation.
To have this work here is making a statement, potentially asking questions about what we value as a city, as a society, and hopefully it's a tribute to our shared humanity.
Tourists and New Yorkers we spoke with expressed different interpretations of what she represents to them.
It's a plus-size woman. I'm a plus-size man. I'm African-American. It's an African-American woman statue. So just seeing another piece for me to stop and just have a moment with was very powerful.
If you look at the eyes, it's looking straight at something. It's focused. It's purposeful.
The sculpture proves to be a well-liked juxtaposition placed among the more traditional statues in Times Square, which is the goal, according to officials, of placing said artwork in such a significant area.
Coming from a person of color background as well, it's really nice to see something come across as like this everyday person that looks a little bit out of place. But I also think that's because of where we are standing. It might not look out of place if everything in our surrounding reflected everyday life more to us.
From Times Square, Zinnia Maldonado, CBS News, New York.
What's going on, everybody? It's Professor Zeus, and I'm back with another video. Yo, if this is your first time at the channel, just know I greatly appreciate you. Thank you for stopping by. I wasn't even going to cover this story, but my wife, she was like, yo, you gotta cover this story. And I was like, okay, babe, I'll talk about it. So, today we're looking at the 12-foot tall bronze statue called Grounded in the Stars by British artist Thomas J. Price. And, as you can see, the statue is of a Black woman. And, it's turning heads, sparking debates, and, is raising some questions, is raising some concerns, and it's starting a whole bunch of conversations, right? So I'm gonna try to break it down, what the statue's all about, why it's controversial, all that good stuff. So go ahead and subscribe. Let's try to break this down, man. So listen, a lot of people are looking at this, right? So first of all, it's a statue, right? Obviously. And it's going to be in Times Square and Duffy Square up until, I think, June 17th. And, Thomas, J. Price says the statue isn't of a specific person. It's a fictional Black woman who can represent anyone you want her to be. And, he's intentionally doing this, placing her between, there's other two statues in this Duffy Square of white men, right? Father Francis P. Duffy, who was a World War I chaplain or priest, and George M. Cohan, who's a legend from Broadway. And the goal of Price, I guess, is to create a contrast and challenge, the traditional ideas of, who actually gets to be immortalized in, public spaces. Now, as you can see from a lot of the people who are in this video, a lot of people were saying that they love this. They say it's relatable, a breath of fresh air, in a place that is larger than life, and yada, 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 right? And, for some, it was a Nigerian lady in there, she was saying, seeing a Black woman, especially a plus-size Black woman, celebrated in Times Square, it felt empowering. So, it's a nod to diversity and a push against the other types of statues that people are used to seeing. And, I get it. Obviously, representation matters, and art should reflect the world we live in today. But where things start to get controversial, where things start to get heated, a lot of people aren't holding back about them not liking the statue. A lot of people were saying the statue's ugly, it's uninspired, or it's just it doesn't seem like a good fit, right? So to me, when my wife sent this to me, and I'm watching this, it obviously started to bring up a question or a conversation that I usually have with my wife about, fitness, obesity, and what this statue really says about the Black community. And I'm not here to, body shame or, try to dismiss the artist's vision with this statue. But, we got to ask, right? Why did, Price, why did he choose this body type for a Black woman? And what message does this send? You know, luckily for me, my family and I, we go to a pretty well gym. We go to a Lifetime. So it's like a pretty quote unquote bougie type of gym. And, there's a lot of different types of people in there. But something I do notice is there's a disproportionate amount of Asian, Hispanic, and white women who go to the gym. Whereas I don't see enough Black women at the gym. And I'm always talking to my wife about this. I'm like, yo, this is a huge issue, because now when you actually go to the gym and you don't see enough Black women there, but then you have an artist who builds a 12-foot statue of the representation of a Black woman, and she's out of shape, she's obese. It just, you start to put together the dots. Like, is there something going on with physicality and obesity and diet and nutrition that we as a community, we're not taking it seriously? Because I've always been telling my wife, I'm like, yo, where are all the other Black women at? Right? My wife will go to like Zumba, she'll go to Pilates, and obviously sometimes she might feel she might be like the only Black woman there or whatever, and different things like that. But it just makes you think, like, if this is a white woman, right, would the sculptor have put this type of body type? And again, I'm not trying to body shame, but if you're trying to put this type of representation out, you would think that the best type of body representation that we had, like I don't know, like a Beyonce or who's any other famous woman athlete or something like that, they would have used a similar build in order to represent Black women in this public space. But now there's a whole bunch of conversations, because it's like now a lot of Black women are looking inward and saying, hey, maybe there is a discussion to be had, right? Even take somebody like Lizzo, right? Everybody liked Lizzo because she's extremely talented, but she's also obese. Well, she used to be obese or overweight, whichever word fits. And that was also part of her whole thing, like, I'm a plus size woman, but I'm extremely athletic. I can perform for 2 hours and stuff like that. And that was all great, with body positivity and all that good stuff. But if you look at Lizzo now, if you look at Lizzo a few years ago versus looking at Lizzo now, she's a completely different person. Now she takes fitness, nutrition extremely serious. And now a lot of people feel like she's going against her whole body positivity idea, right? And the CDC, it says Black women face higher rates of obesity, with over 56% of Black women being obese. So that's a health crisis. And so when you have artists like this British artist choosing to represent Black women with a plus size build in one of the most visible places on earth, it's a statement. It's a bold statement as can be. And it just sucks, because like I said, I really didn't want to talk about this, but it's just like, man, we've got to do better, right? With everything that we know, science, all these we know how important it is to be taking our health seriously. And listen, I tell my wife this all the time. I frequent the gym. I'm an avid person of, physical activity, a good balance of a good diet. But I tell her, like, if this was the caveman times or if this was olden times, my wife would have to be in a fit type of body type because if an emergency happens, hypothetically, I'm supposed to be able to carry her and carry our son simultaneously to get to safety, right? Just think about that. If a crisis emerges, you and your family, do you have the physical strength to be able to pick up your wife and then pick up your son and like just run to safety? I always think about that when I go to the gym. So she also, keeps in mind like, yeah, I need to be, a certain level of a certain physical level, right? Because if something does happen, X, Y, and Z, right? And obviously, not every Black woman obviously is plus size and stuff like that, but a lot of outrage has come out about this sculptor, about this video. And again, I'm not trying to shame anyone's body, right? But it's about questioning, what we choose to uplift, right? If, this artist, if he's trying to challenge the notions of identity and, you know, I respect his intention, right? But art doesn't exist in a vacuum. In a world where Black women are already stereotyped as unhealthy or, undisciplined and different things like that. So when it comes to diet, this statue, it risks enforcing that narrative. And for a community already battling, a lot of health issues, that's a problem. It's an issue. And social media has so many different posts about this. If you look up, 12-foot statue New York and on Twitter, whatever, you're gonna see how everybody feels about it. People are not impressed and people do not like this, right? But my takeaway, grounded in the stars, it's obviously it's more than a statue. It's realistically it's a mirror, right? It forces us to confront how we really see ourselves, you know, how we are seen and what we want to project out into the world, right? Obviously, I think we should celebrate Black women, in all levels. But we also need to champion health, strength, and breaking free from harmful stereotypes, right? This statue could have been aspirational, right? Motivational, a call to, rise above certain challenges, but instead it's left a lot of us feeling really conflicted. But let me know what you guys think about this statue. Is it empowering, problematic, or somewhere in between? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep this conversation going. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We're on our way to 2,000 subscribers, and hit that ring bell so you always get notified when I drop a new video. And never forget, it's you and I verse. Information, application, execution. Until next time, peace.